It's something that sat in my heart for a very, very long time, because I feel all the shame and guilt that I think many gay young men at that time grew up with, generally about their own sexuality, felt really concentrated in that moment. And I hadn't told many people at all until 2 or 3 years ago. And then when I told a couple of people, then I couldn't stop crying. So there's probably more hurt in me about it than I would recognize.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. His new book is called A Life and a Half, The Unexpected Making of a Politician. But really, Chris Bryant's biography is a tale of multiple lives. There's the Oxford-educated Anglican priest turned Labour councillor, MP, government minister, and now Knight of the Realm. And there's also a childhood in fascist Spain in a dysfunctional family, the home he found on stage at the National Youth Theatre and the sexual assault that came with it, and the spirited embracing of his sexuality, which combined protest, prejudice, and quite a lot of partying. So who is the real Sir Chris Bryant? He joins me now. You are this contradiction, aren't you, in that you're very establishment in some ways. You know, Oxford, politics, the church, and yet you kick against it all.
I feel as if I've occupied a niche in virtually every Portico in the establishment at some point. You've left out the BBC yes. as well. So the BBC, the Church of England, Oxford, and all the rest of it. Yes, very much. And I went to prep school, public school, all the rest of it. And yet, I didn't end up a Tory MP. I didn't end up working in the city or whatever, or a barrister. I ended up as a Labour MP for the Rhondda in South Wales. Yes, and I suppose part of what the book, when my editor was saying, well, what are we going to call this book? That was part of the thinking behind it. Was I'd keep on quoting this line from Stephen Sondheim's Follies, and then she careered from career to career, and there is a bit of that about my previous life, and I suppose part of the reason for writing it was wanting to work out how did I end up being the person I am, and are there things that I still need to correct about myself? Yeah,
I mean, the book is, there's a great deal in the book about childhood and family and then young adulthood. There's an awful lot in there about sexuality and being gay and how you felt about it along the way.
Is it too much?
No, but I mean, it makes you feel as though that's been quite a very defining thing for you.
Oh, it has. Of course it is. You know, working out your own sexuality is a really important part of working out who you are. And I guess, there's a generation of people who've grown up now who have no idea that when I was born, it was a criminal offence for a man to have sex with a man. And all through my time at university, the age of consent for gay sex was 21. So anything I did at university with another man was completely illegal. And so that, understanding that, and then the moment of liberation that came when the laws changed and when things were possible for people to live a life together, is one of the parts of the story I really wanted to tell. I mean, for instance, I tell the story of telling my mum that I was gay. She's coming to stay with me. Her life was a bit of a mess. She was coming to stay with me. By this time, I was already an Anglican priest. And I said to her, look, I'm gay. And she says to me two things. First of all, she should always have known because I have such a funny walk. You're not allowed to look at me as I leave now, just to check. But also she said, the terrible thing is, of course, Christopher, you'll be lonely in old age. Because that was the fundamental belief that everybody had about gay men in particular, that in old age they will be lonely. Maybe for lesbians, like the old ladies of Llangollen from in the 19th century, it will be different. But for men, you would be lonely in old age. And that's why it's such an amazing thing to live in a generation where I can talk about having a husband. I mean, you talk about, for quite a long time, not really knowing what your sexuality was, having a girlfriend, a partner, but not really thinking, not really being sure what you... No, well, and I went to Cheltenham College, and there were only boys at Cheltenham College in those days. There was Cheltenham Ladies College down the road, but the twain should never, ever meet was the kind of rule, except that I don't know what inspired me, but I wanted to act in every single play. I wanted to sing in every single choral society, because that meant I could spend time with girls. And when I was at school, I had quite a lot of girlfriends. And then it was my wonderful girlfriend, Donna, great singer, who, when she woke me up one morning. I mean, I probably wasn't meant to be sleeping with anybody because I was a priest in the Church of England. And she said, Christopher, you do know you're gay, by the way, don't you? And then it's not that I don't feel it's like it was something I came to terms with. It just kind of, I settled into it.
Did you not want to be gay?
Well, it's not that I wanted to fight it. It's more that I kind of presumed that I wouldn't be, because the world presumes that you won't be. And incidentally, it still does today. That, understandably, the vast majority of people are not gay. And so the assumption is you'll get married to somebody from the other sex, you'll have children and you'll maybe have a couple of dogs or a cat or whatever. And then you'll have doting grandchildren around you in old age. And of course, that whole world has changed for many people's expectations now. But for me, and of course, I was involved in the church. And the church, when back in those days, had a kind of don't ask, don't tell kind of line. And then it kind of worked out that didn't work anymore. And I knew so many priests in the Church of England who'd long given up their faith. They used to go on holiday to Mykonos or Sitges or Fort Lauderdale or whatever, have affairs whilst they were away, desperately hope that there wouldn't be anybody from the Daily Mail or the News of the World there. And then come back and have to live a life of complete celibacy and a hidden life. And then they'd be terribly bitter.
I mean, do you think you might have been a bishop or a cabinet minister if you hadn't been gay?
I note that we're looking for an Archbishop of Canterbury, and I am still available, technically. I don't know. I was told, I remember going to see Bill Westwood, who was the Bishop of Peterborough, when I was the youth chaplain for the Diocese of Peterborough. And I said, look, I'm leaving. I'm 29. I know this isn't right for me. I'm a gay man. And he said to me, it's one of the stories in the book, he said, look, Christopher, if only you knew how to keep your mouth shut, you could enjoy all the things that I do. You'd get to be a bishop and you'd have regular lunches with Margaret Thatcher. Now, for me, Margaret Thatcher was anathema, from a Christian perspective, because I just thought that what she was doing was despicable and wrong for the country, but equally because she'd just done a great big speech about how homosexuals shouldn't expect that they had a right to exist. And so, and then introduced Clause 28. So for me, it was part of what, stirred the political pot for me, I think, and transformed me from the little Tory who arrived at Oxford to the young lad who went off to Latin America to look at liberation theology and understand how Christians could respond in a world of phenomenal poverty.
And why were you the Tory who went to Oxford? Was that because of parents?
Yeah, so my life started in Cardiff, but my parents originally met when Mum was a makeup artist. She looked after Shirley Bassey's wigs, and Dad had grown, left school at the age of 15, not many qualifications, went to work in Spain in a summer in a hotel, and they met. And Mum and Dad then married. They produced me, and every summer, Dad used to go and work in Spain in the hotel in Salau, and so we.
And he quite liked the fascists.
Oh yes, and I think he always thought that everybody had misinterpreted what Franco was about. My first political memory is driving to the. In a misty day when we were living in Madrid, driving past Carabanchel, which was the political prison not far from where we lived in Madrid, and seeing all the guards, the Guardia Civil, with their black patent leather tricorn hats, long capes and submachine guns, because Franco was coming to visit. And that was my first memory of totalitarian, or my impression of totalitarian government. I mean, it was meant to inspire fear, and it did inspire fear. But Dad's view was rather different. And hardly anybody in those days, British people, used to go to Spain because of Franco. But we did, and we lived there from me for the age of 7 to 12. I remember very clearly one day, we'd only recently arrived, going down, I was playing in the street, I don't know what I was doing, playing with a stick and making marks in the sand, and some kids coming up to me and saying, oye, pelirrojo, ginger, and then tying me to a tree and flicking pine cones at me because I couldn't speak Spanish. So I learned Spanish pretty quickly.
But in terms of sort of how life might have...
Oh, but you were asking me, how did I become the Tory that went to Oxford? So we,
You know, were you made a Tory basically by your upbringing?
Because I went when we lived in Spain. I was sent back to boarding school in Scotland. I tell some interesting stories about boarding school in Scotland. Sex comes into that as well. And then I went to Cheltenham College because we'd moved back to the UK. We were living in Cheltenham, and the kind of expectation was that everybody would be a Tory who ever went to Cheltenham College. I mean, it was built to produce soldiers or administrators for the Raj. So that was the common kind of expectation. Though what I did at Cheltenham College was act and sing in choirs, and so my life was kind of different. But by the time I arrived at Oxford, I became a member of the Conservative Party, partly to make sure that William Hague didn't win the leadership of the Conservative Association, in which I succeeded, though he says everywhere that I wore a cravat every day I was at Oxford. This is completely untrue. I might have owned a cravat, but I'm not sure that I wore it.
Why did you dislike William Hague?
Because he was on the anti-European sort of hard-line end of the Conservative Party, the Thatcherite end of the Conservative Party. And during my time at Oxford, I certainly changed. I think one of the things that also changed me was the National Youth Theatre. So I first went to the National Youth Theatre when I was 15. I was the only public school boy, I think, in the NYT. I absolutely loved it. I met people from every other experience. I was a 15-year-old on my own in London without any parental supervision, and I had all the freedom in the world. And that sort of changed my outlook and stuff as well. And then I went to Latin America as part of my training for the priesthood in 1986. And I spent months in a shantytown in Peru, in Lima, Comas, and saw things. I saw a country that had phenomenal wealth. I mean, such extraordinary fruit and veg, and yet people who died of starvation. And a very violent continent, and there was a curfew on at the time because of the activities of Sendero Luminoso. And then it was in Argentina just after the dictatorship had ended, and I knew friends who'd been tortured. And then I was in Chile. I had to leave Chile.
So the journey from right to left was over that period. I mean, you also sort of imply from the book that it was Section 28
it was certainly
that made you against the Tories.
Well, I couldn't understand why anybody would bring forward legislation to restrict people's freedoms. I just thought everybody should be treated equally under the law. And of course, it mattered personally to me as well. Yes. And also, I suppose I was infuriated by hypocrisy in the church. All sorts of different kinds of hypocrisy. When I was at Theological College, Cuddesdon, there was this strange thing called the Deanery of Nuns. It was a toilet on the top floor in the college, and the top floor had 12 rooms, and the 12 rooms could elect the new dean who would be enthroned on the toilet. And there was all sorts of religious paraphernalia put in this toilet. You could say it was harmless fun, except that mine was the first year when there wasn't just one woman in the college, there were 13 women in the college. So suddenly some of the men, in particular the gay men, wanted to kind of ostracize the women. And for us, some of us on the feminist liberal side who sought the ordination of women and so on, getting rid of the Deanery of Nuns was a symbol. So we just dismantled it one night. We took it all out and dumped it outside the door of somebody who's actually now a bishop. And we were hounded for the rest of that year. Nobody would talk to us. And that kind of hypocrisy in the church, which I associated with hypocrisy within the Tory party, all became part of the same thing.
I mean, obviously, you've got to get through a lot of stuff in a book like this. So you're covering 40 years. But there are two big turning points in your life that I feel I want more on. You know, one is why you became a priest, and the other is why you went into politics. Now, when you talk about going into the church, I mean, you say you didn't have a sort of a sudden religious calling, a moment. So what was it?
I had a sort of moment, which I describe in the book, which was I was on tour with the National Youth Theatre. We were taking two productions, Richard II and Good Lads at Heart, around Europe. We opened the new Royal Theatre in The Hague, for instance. And it was, before a tech rehearsal for one of the shows, that I remember walking into a cathedral and having a feeling that I should do something more with my life than just frivolity. It's nothing more than that. It's not sudden. I can't hear angels or anything, and there's not a great big finger pointing down at me and say, come and do this.
But the church is quite a thing to decide to do from that, isn't it? I mean, there are all sorts of things you could have decided to do.
True. And of course, in the end, I chose other things to do. But I think it was partly, so my mum was alcoholic and it destroyed, my teenage years were really rough because of that. I ended up being the man of the house. Dad left. And that he was right to leave because mum was such a mess. I was doing the ironing, I was doing the cooking, I was doing everything really in the house, and it was just on a daily basis. It was just utter misery. It was the lies. It was the, have you been drinking, mum? No. What's that? Water. Mum, it's clearly vodka. And then, the rows, and I said probably horrible, horrible things to mum for which I still feel guilty. And she said horrible things back, and then she'd fall, and then I'd be taking her to the hospital, or sometimes I took her through DTs and all of that. And two things I think from that mattered were, one was that I found that I was actually quite a resilient person. I didn't fall apart. And that's not because I'm a fundamentally good person. It's just because I had some kind of strength, which I felt I shouldn't just use for myself. And the other thing is that nearly everybody who supported me during those times was involved in the church. My English teacher, Tim Pearce at Cheltenham College, or in my final year, things at home were so terrible that I had to live with the school chaplain and his wife, Sam and Margaret Salter. And Margaret says, well, she's no longer with us, but Margaret used to say that because I was so grumpy at breakfast time, they just used to leave me, I still am incidentally, they just used to leave me completely on my own for 15 minutes with The Guardian. And that's what changed my politics. That's what she reckons. My dad always read the Daily Telegraph. Suddenly I was reading The Guardian. So I think it's that combination. And so it meant that my first day at Oxford, my first Sunday, I went to church. I chose to go to church.
Because you start off talking about how there's another itch I can never scratch enough. I have always wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
The sense that something just isn't fair drives me crazy. I mean, is that a post hoc explanation of your life, or is that consciously how you felt?
I think, so the thing about alcoholism, as a child of an alcoholic, is you just feel so powerless and it makes you so angry. And then you feel guilty about feeling angry with the person that you want to love. And then you feel angry that they're making you feel guilty. And so it all gets wrapped up into this horrible, horrible thing of powerlessness. And so, I mean, in a way, the thing that I think now, and it was very striking to me when I was doing the audiobook, so reading it out 6 months after the last take, as it were, when I've been writing it, what struck me was, well, actually, you felt powerlessness. You hate feeling powerless, and that's true today too. And so you want to exercise power. That's probably why I'm a politician.
Yes, well, that was the next turn, isn't it? That you leave the church.
But I think also, I mean, it's worse. My theology, my religion was never, praying to a God with a great big beard up in the sky.
Yes.
It was never that kind of.
It was primarily
religion.
about helping people rather than a spiritual.
Well, not least because I don't think Jesus was very interested in metaphysical issues. He was much more interested in practical teaching about how we live our lives here on this earth.
I mean, do you have faith? Do you believe in?
Yes, I have a faith, but it's the faith I always had.
How literal is it when it comes to?
Oh, it's never literal. I mean, and fundamentalism I abhor in politics or religion or anything like that. I have a very pragmatic Christianity and I have a very pragmatic understanding of politics. That bit is always the same. But I refer to a word that I really, really love in Spanish, which is ojalá. It's actually a sort of Arabic word, and it means I wish, or would that, or if only. And that's a really strong part of what every single day I wake up with, which is if only I could change this. If only I could be this. If only Gaza were different or whatever. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of things that I feel that about all the time. And sometimes that powerlessness is so oppressive that that's when you want to burst out with rage and change the world.
And that's why you decided to go to party politics?
Yeah.
Why you wanted to be an MP? Because you thought, that's how I can change the world.
Well, partly because I decided I could no longer do the church because I didn't want to end up being a bitter, twisted priest in a parish, not able to leave the tied cottage because I couldn't afford it, but and no longer.
So you went to
faith.
Another deeply hypocritical world.
Says in which the journalist.
Well, no, what I mean is in which people were equally hiding their sexuality and being hypocritical about all those sorts of things as well.
Well, I didn't.
It was a similar institution.
I didn't think of it
respect.
and I don't think of it in that way. I think of it as a place where you have to be honest as you can. And incidentally, I mean, one of the things that's strange about writing a book like this, which is of course inherently narcissistic, so I've made myself feel guilty about that as well, and then cross with myself for feeling guilty, is that you do have to check some of the things that you always thought were facts. My mother always said that her father played for Glasgow Rangers. I didn't believe her, but it's true. He did,
right.
Amazingly, and had pretty good career, a footballing career. But other things I've had to check to make sure that my memory is actually accurate.
Which turned out not to be.
Sometimes it's turned out to be, no, I can't possibly have been there. I mean, it just doesn't add up. Or sometimes I've had to, things have been in a wrong order in my mind, and working out the order is kind of intriguing.
We'll come back to politics, but I mean, one of the big stories that you've revealed is about the National Youth Theatre and your time there, and you've done this in the press as well, in that you've revealed that you were sexually abused by the founder of the National Youth Theatre, Michael Croft. Why did you come out with this now? How had you built up to it for a long time? Had you?
So it's a story that's always been there. No. It's something that sat in my heart for a very, very long time, because not because I feel particularly traumatized by it, but because I feel all the shame and guilt that I think many gay young men at that time grew up with, generally about their own sexuality, felt really concentrated in that moment. I tell the story as matter-of-factly as I can in the book. So
Why do you tell it matter-of-factly? It's interesting the way you tell it. For something that's so emotional.
And I hadn't told many people at all until 2 or 3 years ago, and then when I told a couple of people, then I couldn't stop crying. So it probably is more, there's probably more hurt in me about it than I would recognize, or I would want to recognize. And probably I like to think of myself as resilient, and so therefore I am resilient, if that makes any kind of sense. So in essence, I'd done a year's. I was in the National Youth Theatre my first year on a course when I was 15. I got to know Michael Croft. He was the founder of the National Youth Theatre. I clearly became a bit of a favourite and a protégé fairly quickly. The next spring, he rang up my mother and said, "Would Chris come and help with the auditions in Bristol?" I'm a 16-year-old. And I go and stay in Bristol and stay overnight. And, in separate hotel rooms, but nonetheless, we go to dinner. He wants me to come back and have a whiskey in his room with him and all that kind of stuff. But I kind of work out very quickly then, and when I then joined the season that year, that the best way to deal with Michael was to make sure if he had another glass of port, he would fall asleep and then it would be fine. But he used to take me to dinner regularly. We would chat. I would unburden myself about all the stuff at home. I was, this is the worst point in my, with the stuff with mum. And then one night, my normal plan just didn't go right. There wasn't any port. I was back at his house. I went off to the loo. He came back. He was just wearing a kind of silk dressing gown and nothing underneath apart, and he said, "Come and suck on this." And I mean, of course, it's terrible. It's, he was abusing his position of trust as much as anything else. And I know there are other people in the National Youth Theatre who went through the same and who went through much, 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 much worse. After that, Michael never did it again. And I ended up doing his funeral because he asked me to.
Yes, I mean, your friendship, relationship with him carried on.
Our friendship.
And,
indeed. And
how do you explain that now? I mean, do you think you were sort of basically still groomed, or was it a genuine friendship? I mean, you officiated at his funeral. I mean,
I think it was a genuine friendship, and I didn't feel destroyed by it. But I know that there were others who were put in much, much worse situations than me. And one of the reasons I decided to include it in the book was because I know that there are others. And I mean, the response since this came out in some of the press, I mean, the vast majority of people have been gorgeous and lovely and very supportive and understanding. Some people have been utterly vile, and said, refused to believe me, said it's just despicable, you're just trying to sell a book, and all that kind of stuff. And that's when you kind of realize why lots of women never go to the police when they've been raped, why lots of people have never bothered to say when they've been abused, because you end up getting as much of the abuse in social media as anybody else did.
Why do you think some people have reacted like that? Is it because they knew him, or is it? No. Oh, well, I've not spoken to anybody who knew Michael. These are people just emailing me, because it's easy to find an MP, isn't it, and send them an email or send them a message on social media. I mean, look, I'm not. I refuse to be a victim in it, if you see what I mean. Yes.
I'm telling what happened because I think that too often abuse of that nature happened in a lot of organizations and nobody ever owned up to it. And that is a fundamental failing. And we need to change that whole culture. That's why I told the story.
And you sort of brought the National Youth Theatre in on your
completely. Oh yeah, no. I told.
And I should say they sort of said that they've got safeguarding, practices in place now, and
I've talked through all their safeguarding practices, and I know that the National Youth Theatre is a fundamentally safe place, and I think any modern youth organisation would be absolutely well. Apart from anything else, the law is much clearer now than it ever was, and everybody knows what their responsibilities are. Yeah.
I should also say, just for transparency, I'm on the development board of the National Youth Theatre, was also in it as you were about 10 years after you. But
oh, so you're younger than me? Is that the point you're making?
No. I was just very slow. But I just say that just for. Just so people know.
I think that. I think the National Youth Theatre is a wonderful organisation, and if I'm weighing the balance of was the National Youth Theatre good for me or not, it was 100% transformative in a wonderful, wonderful way. It's not just that all those vocal exercises, putaka budaga, popakata petal, copper plate kettle, all of that kind of stuff. It gave me a different set, a new family. I mean, Ed Wilson, who was Michael Croft's successor, and Brian Lee, they were absolutely adorable with me. I went on holiday with them and Daniel Craig and others. And they were really important to me when I was leaving the church, because they were church people as well. They were really important to me in providing me with that kind of transition into a new world.
And how can we be more confident now that these...
Well, I certainly am in relation to the National Youth Theatre, because and I've gone through they've taught me through everything that happens, and it is extremely rigorous. Nobody works in the National Youth Theatre unless they've gone through not just the simple BDSM checks, but the full second level as well. And I tell another story in the book about when I applied to Oxford, and I was interviewed by a tutor at St. Cat's. And he made me read out an essay on a poem by Shelley, Mont Blanc, which is a difficult poem, sitting on a toilet whilst he lay in the bath soaping himself. Now, I mean, some people have said to me, well, why didn't you report that? Well, because I assumed I wouldn't then get into Oxford. So of course I didn't. And that's the abuse, isn't it? It's the abuse of the position of trust and of power that still makes me really, really angry.
Do you think it makes you a better politician?
Well, I don't think there's any point to a politician unless they've got some kind of edge to them, and an understanding of humanity and what it is to be human and take some of the knocks. And there are lots of different ways of, taking the knocks and proving your resilience in life, I suppose. And I think you want people to be resilient, but also sensitive enough to the world around them that they don't, that they're not completely out of touch.
Yeah, and I suppose this comes back to sort of what the real Chris Bryant is, I suppose, in terms of sort of when you talk about edge. Do you see yourself as that person who has to kick from the inside?
Yes, I mean...
you join all these establishments.
Yes.
Do you do that?
Oh, I've always wanted to fit in.
To fit in rather than change them?
Yeah, well, no, I've wanted to fit in, but also to change them. And that's a difficult... I mean, when you're a minister, I'm a minister. I'm not here as a minister now, but I'm a minister in the government, and I'm part of a team, and I always want to be part of a team. I think teamwork it's why I'm a socialist, and I would use the word socialist. To quote John Donne, no man is an island entire unto himself, seek not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I am a part of humanity, and I am passionate about that. But it's funny, some people have looked at the photos in the book and they said, you still stand in exactly the same way as when you were a 7-year-old child, with my right foot always slightly forward. And I think Matthew Paris in his autobiography wrote that you can never really understand the man unless you've understood the child, because that's when you feel most keenly and so on. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I still feel just as keenly as ever before, but I think all the things that course through my veins now course through my veins when I was an 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Yes, but I suppose wanting to join the team and be part of the team can sometimes make people then look away, shut up, keep quiet, not complain, not demand more. Are you one of those, or are you one of those people who internally is more of a troublemaker, wants to kick against things, wants to change things?
I don't think of myself as a troublemaker, but I do think of myself as being independently minded. There's a funny thing, there's a photo in the book of me theoretically in the cricket team at school when I'm 12, I think, except everybody else is in cricket whites and I'm the scorer. So I'm part of the team, but I'm not really part of the team. And weirdly, I've got my eyes closed. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way the photo was taken. But and I sometimes feel that's me, that I'm in the team, but just slightly to one side, which is maybe that's what a Labour person always feels, because you don't want to accept the world the way it is. You do want to change it, whether it's the establishment or it's just the world. I mean, I remember when I was at theological college, it used to drive me insane if people asked us to sing the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. I mean, where on earth did anybody get that idea from? Not from Jesus.
But it's interesting that you joined institutions where, as a gay man, you were not easily going to be accepted as part of the team ever, and arguably may still not be.
No, well, it's interesting in politics.
And you didn't go in. You didn't stick with acting where you probably could have been accepted as part of the team. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, politics for me started. My first elected office was a Hackney councillor, and I tell some awful stories about what Hackney politics was like back in those days. Absolutely vile and horrible. Homophobia being thrown around all over the place. But I also tell stories of phenomenal gay abandon at a particular time. The day I had stopped being a vicar, so my last sermon was at Peterborough Cathedral on Maundy Thursday in 1991. I drive down to London. All my furniture has gone ahead of me and is now stacked up in a flat in London, in Hackney. I walk in the flat and I think, oh, Lord, I'm not going to do anything about this now. So I put on a tight white T-shirt and a pair of Levi 501s, the official, regulation uniform of the day for a gay man, go off to the London Apprentice, a club that no longer exists, with its black walls, walk up to the bar, order myself a pint, and then suddenly realise, just as it's already been poured, that I haven't got my wallet with me. And a young man standing next to me, bald, short, ginger, with a Glaswegian accent, said to me, "It's all right, I'll pay, and you don't even have to have sex with me." And it was Jimmy Somerville, who'd provided the kind of soundtrack to my life, as it were, of coming out, and that was a phenomenal period of change in the 1990s. AIDS still around, very much so, and a generation of gay men slightly older than me had all gone.
But that's what you mean by the period of liberation, do you? That's
Yes.
the 90s.
The 90s, yeah, completely. Before I became an MP, and then I worked for the BBC, did various different things, worked for the Labour Party for a while. I was there kind of at the beginning of New Labour, first met Peter Mandelson in the changing room
I
of
was
the
going to
YMCA.
say, you tell a couple of funny stories about Peter Mandelson in the changing room of the YMCA, and also in a couple of gay bars,
Yes, we went to Paris together once.
picking up people.
Well, I'm not sure he managed in the end, but yes, he was trying. Though I think my favourite is I was dating a Spanish architect at the time called Federico in Madrid, and the only person who'd won any elections anywhere in Europe for years on the left was Felipe González, the leader of the Spanish Socialist Party. And so I was staying with Federico for a couple of weeks, and Peter decided to invite himself because there was a general election in Spain, and he wanted to see how they won elections. So Peter came and stayed with us, and I then went around with him to all the various party election meetings and did all the translating for him. We were at the very last kind of reception or big kind of rally of the campaign. Felipe had just done his big speech, and we were asked, would we like to come and meet Felipe González? And I'm really, really excited, thinking this is my political hero. And Peter goes, no, I want to meet him over there. So we went and chatted to Antonio Banderas for half an hour instead. And then he sent me back for his autograph.
Have you checked any of these stories with him, that he doesn't mind you putting them out there?
He remembers that story.
There's a particularly funny one in a bar of him pretending to be someone he isn't. But
Well, yes, because so we were in a bar. We were in the Le Quetzal in Paris, which has a very long, or used to have. I don't know whether it exists anymore actually, but it had a very long bar. And Peter's going, I like him over there, and I go, why don't you go and talk? No, you go and tell him. What? I'm not going to tell him that you fancy him. You can do your own dirty work. Anyway, eventually he does go over to him and he says, hello, my name's Mark. And the guy goes, no, it's not. You're Peter Mandelson. We were at Oxford together. They then chatted away for the rest of the evening. But anyway, yes. My husband said, all right, there are too many Peter Mandelson stories.
But have you checked with Lord Mandelson, as he is now?
I haven't.
He's okay.
Actually.
No.
Well, I checked the bishop story. There's quite a few bishops, well, and for that matter, drag queens in the book as well. Quite a lot of drag queens. I used to love Julie Pade, who used to perform at Molly Moggs and used to get on the bus with the mic while singing, I don't know, a Baccarat song or something like that. Sorry, I can boogie, or yes, sir, I'm a lady. Carry on singing on the bus as it went up Tottenham Court Road. Japanese tourists looking completely and utterly bemused, let alone the people sitting on the bus.
I mean, to come back to sort of changing the world, I mean, you've been in politics for a couple of decades now. I mean, is the fact that you stayed in it an indicator that you think you are succeeding?
Succeeding. I mean, I think there are things that I'm really, really proud of that I've fought for over the years. I think I was probably the first person in the British Parliament who called out Putin. Long before 2014, and I was certainly the only person in 2014 who said, if we allow him to take Crimea, he will come for the rest of Ukraine. And I got condemned as a warmonger for it and all the rest of it back in 2014. I'm proud of the campaign I've run on acquired brain injury over the years, partly because of people playing rugby in South Wales, and the concussions that they suffered at the time have led to early onset dementia and cognitive problems and depression and anxiety and all sorts of things. I'm proud of the fact that I was the minister that took forward the abolition of cluster munitions. I'm proud of the deal we've just done for musicians with the record labels. So yes, there's stuff, but it's all, for me, it's about getting things done. It really is about getting things done. It's great when we win elections because then we can get things done. When you're in opposition, all you can do is throw snowballs at people standing on the bridge.
I mean, you talk about crying with Frank Dobson, losing the 92 election.
I was Frank Dobson's election agent in 1992 and mostly working actually on Glenda Jackson's campaign next door. And that led to a whole load of other stories. But and yes, Frank was the shadow energy secretary, so he would have been the Secretary of State for Energy, I guess. And we would probably have introduced a miners' compensation scheme in 1992 if we'd won. And I was driving him around the day after the election with a megaphone saying, "Thank you for voting Labour." And then we had to stop, and the two of us sat crying for a good 15 or 20 minutes until a traffic warden tapped on the car and said, "You're on a double yellow line." And I think that instilled in me a sense that you had to take the nation with you. You couldn't just presume that you were going to win because the other side were rubbish.
But I mean, in terms of the things that make you cry with rage now, I mean, the accomplishments you've mentioned, I don't want to denigrate them in any way, but they are not the central causes of either the Labour Party or the government. The old government, the last Labour government or this government. I mean, is the truth that, being in politics is a bit disappointing?
No, completely not. And
that you don't change the world as you would like to.
Oh no, because you change the world person by person, step by step, and lots of little things. I mean, sometimes I get asked, "What is it similar being a constituency MP to being a priest?" It's identical, absolutely identical. I remember, when I was a priest, my first visit to an elderly lady, the lady died with my hand, and I was holding her hand as she died. I was giving her communion. A few weeks ago, somebody came to my constituency surgery, and he'd made a terrible decision 14 years ago, and everything else following on had just been a series of places where there wasn't a good decision available to him anymore. And we've managed to sort it out for him. I mean, that is just such a phenomenal privilege to be able to be alongside somebody in that way as an MP. And it's the bit that we have uniquely in our system that lots of other systems don't have. I mean, if I speak to a Spanish MP or a French MP, they just don't have that part of their equation, and I adore that part of it.
So when you hear the sort of the rage of the electorate now, that sense, well, you've got into power and you're making a mess of it, and you're not doing anything fast enough, and you're not changing Britain the way you promised you would. I mean, do you understand that? Do you feel
completely.
that as well?
Oh, I feel all the impatience. I mean, I'm a very impatient person. You could argue many times that's been my undoing. I've run at a gate far too fast, and I feel all that impatience myself. I want to get things done this afternoon, not wait until next week. And sometimes when you've got to wait for the grid to say yes, you can announce this, you go. Argh!
I mean, isn't it very? I mean, you're a minister. You're part of. You're in the team that you wanted to be in the team. And that with that comes the responsibility of not criticising it, taking ministerial responsibility. Isn't that really frustrating as well? I mean, that you can't shout about the thing that's making you angry.
Well, you can't shout publicly, but you could. But you also have the privilege of being behind the scenes and being able to say, right, what is the best version of what we can sort out here? And I'm very proud. I am absolutely adoring the work that I'm able to do at the moment, whether it's, highly technical stuff that I'm doing around telecoms or space or whatever, or data for that matter, or it's, trying to sort out British artists being able to tour around Europe and getting creative education for every child in every school in the country, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it is my passion, and I'm very excited about it, and I feel free to be able to push the boundaries of what is achievable.
But on the bigger picture, what do you say to people when they confront you with their disappointment?
I understand the frustration and the impatience. I equally get frustrated when people want us to have transformed the world in 50 minutes. When it takes a long time to run a country down, and it takes a long time to get it back on its feet.
But it's difficult, isn't it? Because people look at America now and they go, well, look at Donald Trump. He's only been in power a few months and he seems to be changing things.
Yeah.
Why don't you change things? Not in the same way, perhaps, but...
Well, because I don't think we would want to change them in the same way. And secondly, we don't have a presidential system. And I guess there are some people who would want us to have a presidential system. I would wholeheartedly disagree with that.
But you've got a massive majority, so you can do whatever you want.
Well, no, you can't. And everything else I've written about in the past is about, I do believe in the parliamentary system. I believe that you have to, not least because it means you have to be a team player. I always thought that one of the problems with Boris was that Boris Johnson would be a great person maybe in a system, in a presidential system, but it just doesn't work in a parliamentary system. And that's why I think you have to trust in making sure that the team works more effectively as a unit rather than just as individuals.
I mean, you're a Welsh MP, and people are suggesting that Reform will win in Wales. Do you think that's likely?
I know I look like Mystic Meg, but I'm not Mystic Meg. And I've always thought, Harriet Harman taught me something years ago, which she said, when you're an MP, you are not a commentator, you're a player. So,
but you see the threat.
Of course I see the threat. And I see the monstrous misinformation. We've seen it many times. It's easy to build a grievance. Always easy to build a grievance in politics, 10 times more difficult to be able to sort out a solution. I mean, I watched your interview the other day with Andrea Jenkins, and I just thought, yeah, okay, so you've spotted the problem and you know how to wind up the grievance, but not you, but you haven't got an answer. You haven't got an answer to a single one of the things that you think is a problem. So, look, I mean, I think we are there to do two things as a government. The first is we are there to put right the things that have been broken. The classic instance, I think, is the prison system in the UK. We just haven't got enough prisons for the prisoners that we want to put in prison. So we should sort that. And the previous government knew that. They were given endless advice to that effect and did nothing about it. So that's the kind of thing where we've just got to put things right. We've got to mend them. And that will take time. And then the second thing is we've got to make sure that everybody gets a decent chance in life. And I know from my constituency, it says this more loudly perhaps than any other in the country, that lots of people don't get a decent chance in life.
Well, that's easier said than done, isn't it? Making sure everyone gets a decent...
Of course.
Because your career is very interesting because you span that period that you talk about of great sort of hope in the 90s, the beginning of New Labour, the Tony Blair government, and then opposition, and then this. And a lot of people thought this would be the same. You just rerun the same playbook as New Labour in the late 90s, and it'll all be fine. And it's turned out not to be the case.
It's completely different, and I tell you why.
So how has politics changed over that 20-year period?
Well, social media has fundamentally changed everything. So you don't have, 3 news programs every day giving you a curated version of what is today's news. You have millions of people, some of them with good intent and some with not good intent, stirring the pot, getting their version out there and so on. And some element of that I absolutely adore. But some of it is, we know, profoundly scurrilous and deliberately manufactured for effect. So that's a much more difficult place to navigate.
Do you think your generation has worked out how to do politics in this world now?
No, of course we haven't.
Not yet.
I mean, I think it's really tough. And boy, I mean, I look at the new intake of MPs, I think they're phenomenal. I have not seen such a good intake of MPs as there is. And I'm talking predominantly about Labour because that's what I know, but I look at people in other parties as well, and there are some phenomenal MPs there. And it can be a very frustrating process being a backbench MP. I spent most of my time as an MP, I've been a backbencher. I've relished it and I've enjoyed it.
in that quote that I put to you before, you said the sense that something just isn't fair drives me crazy. An inexplicable rage boils up inside me. Sometimes it's a furious refusal to accept that something is happening. What is it that's got you boiling right now?
Ukraine.
Politics?
I feel so angry. I mean, obviously, predominantly with Putin. And I feel very proud, actually, of the role that Keir Starmer and other Western leaders have played in making sure that we step up to the mark to make sure that Ukraine isn't just abandoned. This was so not only predictable, but predicted. And that makes me so angry. And I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We went to Kyiv 2 weeks before the second invasion. And we were advised not to go to the Donbass region. We said, well, we're here, we're going. And every step of the way they kept on saying, you mustn't, it isn't safe, and said, well, we're going. And we went to Avdiivka, right on the border with what was then the division line with Russians, and we could see Russian snipers pointing at us and at Ukrainian forces. And I mean, we just knew this was going to happen, and I feel still so angry that Russia lied and lied and lied and lied, and David Cameron and William Hague and Boris Johnson completely surrendered Crimea to Russia, and we failed. And I don't want us to fail again.
I thought you were going to say Gaza, actually. It's interesting that you reach for Ukraine first.
Well, of course, I mean, how can you watch either the events, of the attack, the Hamas attack on Israel, or what's happened in the last 18 months and not feel absolute fury and want to do something? And how can you not feel guilt about not being able to do more? And what would more look like, and how could you make more happen? Of course, all the time, every single day, every time you watch the news. How can you not feel that?
I suppose that's why you carry on.
Yes, because I was asked the other day, well, what have you ever achieved? And sometimes I list the small things, but of course I'm also part of a much bigger team. And then in my time as a politician, we've managed to get a minimum wage in place. We've managed to put legislation in place which enables more women to be able to come forward around rape. We've changed the law in so many ways that I think has improved society. We introduced an Equality Act, all of these things that I passionately believe in. And I think we are making a better world. There's a hymn I always used to laugh at. Nearer and nearer draws the time that will surely be, when the earth shall be filled with the glory of God and the waters cover the sea. But it starts with that idea of when on earth is everything going to change? And I just still hold on to that faith about politics, which is nearer and nearer draws the time that will surely be.
Chris Bryant, Sir Chris, thank you very much indeed.
That always sounds like I'm a pantomime dame.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Fourcast. Until next time, bye-bye.